How's it going, everyone, tonight? We're live with Stacy from Root Scoots and Scales. How's your night going so far?
Hey, am I live?
Yep.
Nice. I was wondering. It's the new Chromebook, so I only use it like twice. So it's going good.
So, when did you guys begin Root Scoots and Scales?
I think like I had an Instagram that I kind of posted lizard photos on since like probably 2016. I've been keeping since 2007, but we didn't actually like name it anything really till I think it was like May 2020 when we had way too much time on our hands because everything was shut down.
So, were you guys breeding and selling before 2020 though, or
Like a little bit. It kind of like a lot of it was grow outs. Like I bought like little baby geckos and stuff, and all Dan's snakes. Like he was keeping before we got together, but he bought a lot of his snakes as like little babies. So they're just now in the past couple years starting to get actual like size that we could pair them.
well, and that is the hard part with some snake species
Mm-hmm.
that you need 4 to 6 years, some even longer, and it is sometimes better to grow up the babies in your own collection, though.
I do prefer that, even with like the geckos and stuff. I noticed that they just a lot of times if you buy like a big female, it takes her a really long time to adjust, or she's like done laying eggs by the time you get her.
Yeah, and especially geckos, some of those don't breed as long as skinks. Skinks you can breed into 20s and 30s, where you got a couple years on geckos.
Yeah, that's why I actually like skinks a lot because like I don't have to be like I get really attached to them, so I don't really like to just sell them off when they're not having babies anymore. So a lot of the geckos, you got like the little tiny micro guys, you got like 2, 3, 4 years, and then they're like just drops. Like the egg production isn't as great.
How long do those live?
Like the viper geckos, like they could still live like 10 years, but you're gonna be getting like one egg every once in a while instead of like a nice set of eggs every 2, 3 weeks or so.
I wonder why that is that they drop off so quick, and some species can just keep going till they can't.
Yeah, it's probably just like life cycle related. So some of them are just like live fast, have as many babies as possible. They're probably gonna get predated in the wild and in captivity while we're keeping them safe. So they're just gonna live like the full lifespan.
Yeah, and that is very true. I didn't think about that. The wild, they're gonna breed till 2, and they might not make it till 4.
Yeah, and we're keeping. There's no like hawks coming down after them in captivity. So
Um, so since you and Dan both keep, are there any issues like deciding on what to add, or you guys got it pretty figured out by now?
like it's a little bit of a discussion. Like it's mostly based on what would work best in the rooms that we have. Like I have the lizards upstairs is a little warmer. It's I temperature cycle them a little bit in the winter, and then the downstairs room is mostly like the tropical snakes in the boiga, and they're from Indonesia where it doesn't have too much of a cycle, so it's generally a more stable temperature year round. Like I most of the stuff in this room, it gets like a little cool cycle. Some of it I'll put like supplemental heat over it, but for the most part they're all on the same page up here. So if it could be added in nicely into the one of the rooms, we're running out of space, so we can't really add too much more. But that's basically how it goes.
Now, is there room for expansion? Like, do you guys ever want to get like a facility, or you'd rather have the lower overhead and stay at home?
It depends on the situation. Like we might be moving in the near future, and that is definitely a consideration if like the basement is large enough to actually have like a huge thing, or if there's room in the backyard to build something there. I'm not like super set on either idea. They both have like pros and cons. Right now we're just doing spare rooms, so
Well, it gives you time to plan, and as much as you have, you'll probably want to plan the move and hire as much friends you can to help.
I moved all my stuff in, I think it was 2021, and we did that in like 2 trips, I think it was. It
That's
wasn't too
not too
bad, but we had 2 cars in there, like larger. You could put the seats down and just fit everything in there. But now everything's got like upgraded cages because it grew, so it's gonna be a little more tricky.
well, and if you plan ahead, and you got a lot more, you could just get the U-Haul. If you
Hmm.
do it, spring or fall where it's not too hot.
That's the plan because I don't want to be moving when we've got like pregnant skinks or anything.
When we moved, it was during brumation, so it kind of didn't really affect much. I had a couple not go the distance, but that could have just happened anyway.
It was like any good thing to think about. Like in my mind, it's not gonna be super duper bad if we do have to move with them pregnant or anything because the Shinisaurus was actually gravid at the time, and I didn't know yet because she was too early along. But a couple months later, she had 8 little babies. So
Well, and some of the animals are imported gravid, and that's got to be a lot harsher than what you're doing. You're gonna make sure that you avoid every pothole you see. You're gonna pack everything to the
yep.
best of your capability.
And if we're like on that topic, I had eggs from crested geckos and a couple other things at the time, and I used that like polyfill stuffing, and I just packed it around the incubation containers, and I don't think any of those eggs moved a millimeter.
And so, were those in an incubator, or were those like Cresties where they're room temperature?
I just put them all loaded up in a styrofoam box, so it might have dipped a little bit, but it wasn't enough. Everything in there hatched out fine, so.
Well, that's good. You planned ahead, and even if you would have lost one or two, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. And I'm surprised though. That's like, some eggs are a lot finicky than others, where they must have just been some quality ones that they had great calcium, no windows or nothing.
Yeah, and you gotta think in the wild they'll get like a cold snap or two or something weird will happen at least once if they're incubating for several months at a time. So maybe a couple hours, maybe not too bad.
Yeah, and I've heard stories people losing power for 36 hours, and they keep the incubator closed, so
Mhm.
that little bit probably didn't you know change a whole lot.
Yeah.
So this question I just found the answer to, but have you faced any challenges breeding blue tongues?
Oh my gosh. Well, it was going pretty good. There were no like serious incidents or injuries and stuff, and this would be the third season pairing. And just like an hour ago, one of them lost a tail tip. The male grabbed it and it was too quick. I thought it was gonna be one of those like breeding chomps where they kind of like tug a little bit and they're not like super violent, but that was a chomp and that tail tip is gone. Like that skink will be fine, but oh my goodness, it's gonna grow
Oh,
back. It's gonna be a little nubbin.
it's scary. I had one male get mad that the female walked over him today. He rolled her, and she rolled with him just right, and leg looks good. Nothing seems unattached, but either way, I'm giving her the season off just in case.
Yeah.
If it's she's still putting weight on it, but being rolled around by a skink can't be fun.
No, that's like the only downside I think really to like breeding these guys. Usually I'm there and like if they both bite each other, if you grab them, like you can stop the twirl, but that tail tip was just too quick.
And that's what he did. He kind of death rolled then.
Like a little yoink, not like full on. I've seen videos of like some traumatizing stuff, so.
Well, at least those will heal.
Mhm.
And are you gonna give the female the rest of the season off, or see how it looks in a couple days?
I don't even. That's the only skink I have that isn't like a proven male or female. and it was not showing any interest in any of the like girls. So I just tried pairing it with a boy, and the way he reacted, I have a feeling that it's a male that just doesn't want to participate this year.
Has it shed yet?
It's in shed if it's a he. So we'll see after that, maybe. But that was I don't know if I'm gonna put him with anybody else because of that. He or she.
Well, and you got a decent other number where
Hmm.
even if, one doesn't go, you'll still end up with a pretty good season.
Yeah, I'm not pushing for that one off that I'm wondering about. So
So, do you just pretty much, since you don't really do like a cooling brumation, do you just lower their heat for a couple weeks or?
these guys, I do move to the basement, or at least I did the past couple years. I would move them down like Octoberish, and it gets the 60s down there, like 58 to 62 thereabouts. But I actually left two boys upstairs this year with just like how I do this room, and they're breeding, so I might not even have to send the northerns down like that.
Well, and what I do, I just get them to, 70, and sometimes, depending on the level, it's, higher 60s, and
Hmm.
I haven't had much issue. Some people will go in the like low 50s even,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you don't need it. Some people won't even brumate them at all and just, watch the body
Hmm.
language.
I've thought about trying that, and that's why I left the two up just to see what would happen if I really needed to like hard cool them like that. And so far, it's pretty good. As long as those boys that I'm using, if anyone has a litter from that, I'll know. So.
Well, and they, from a successful standpoint, they should be fine. I've had males that didn't brumate at all. He was in the mood, and I got two successful litters from him his first year, and he was under a year. So
Mhm.
everything should be viable. Just hit the window right and hope
Mhm.
for the best.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh, do you do like 3 to 5 locks, or depends on the pairing?
I'd like to aim for five. Any more than five, and it's like I feel like she's getting beat up. But some of them, like you only get like two out of it before if she's just running or it's stressing her too much. But we're doing really good this year. Like everyone's kind of chill, except for that one thing that happened today. So,
Well, and
like I've got some that are already at like five, so they're don't have to worry about them.
do you spread them out at all, or do you just
Hmm.
do them one?
Like I'll try like maybe 2 days in a row for the same, and then I'll skip a little bit just because I feel like it spreads it out a little bit. If she's cycling, then there's time. Like I didn't miss it.
Well, it's kind of hard to tell. Like you can't really see the follicles, and I've
Yeah.
heard even if you ultrasound is kind of a waste. So I think spreading them out's probably the smartest. That way you know whether you do it 7 days. I've heard some people even doing like a week in between, but
Hmm. I'm gonna try that. Like I'm gonna toss in the mail with some of the pairs like 2 weeks from now and see if that has any difference. Because I write like all the stuff down just to keep track, see if anybody did better particular year.
do you change up much each year or not really?
I've gotten different ideas. Like a lot of the viable locks that happened last year, I like write down day by day how it goes. And I checked, and like right around now to next week is when they locked up, like all of the pregnancies happened that were successful in like that time frame. So I don't necessarily know exactly what it means, but I know it's like this time frame is a good time.
Well, and even if you, because I can't really, some ovulations you could see, but if you could track that success window and you could do it all the same each year, even if you can't see the ovulation and you don't want to deal with ultrasounds, if it, because some will cycle about the same time each year. I've had
Yeah.
litters almost the same day. So I would imagine, unless you have any huge swings, if your room jumps 10 degrees for a week, that might mess things up. But
I think I actually saw one ovulate last year because I pulled her out of and took a look at her, and she was so large, and it was like way too early for her to actually have huge babies in her yet, and I thought that was it. So
I would, so I've seen a picture of one that I think was Cheryl posted, and yeah, it's kind of
she
looks like
was
they have a,
so wide and
yeah.
tall.
So I saw one last year, and she was receptive before, but the male wasn't. And then the next day she was large, and you could tell she was done. And sure enough, she slugged out 3 months later, give or take. So it's a sign of them, but
Yeah.
even the days I'll try to watch them a bit more. They're good at hiding it, or maybe some don't swell as large.
Mhm.
Are you able to tell it easy in the other species you keep, or
It's tricky still. Like I think you got to get them right on that day.
because I'm sure like the micro geckos, that's gonna be a one you probably won't see it. They'll be hidden, or they're so small you couldn't tell anyway.
So I generally like when I see the eggs in their bellies because some of those are small, and if they're up against the glass, you can see the little white orbs in their belly, like right before they're about to lay. So that's how I keep track of when I should go checking around in there.
Well, and when you could see that, that
hmm
definitely helps. Um, so what all are you pairing for this year? You're doing northerns. Did you get IJs to go yet?
Got three females. There's one that we picked up over the summer. I'm not sure if that's a boy or a girl yet. No interest either way. And then I have one more female that is proven that I still haven't paired yet. So.
I noticed you got these nice light ones that were you able to get those males to go? Those are really nice.
He's not interested, but his brother is. So that's his brother.
Okay. And he's got some great, thick banding with some,
hmm
nice no black. I think he would produce some great babies.
It's weird. I wanna figure out if that's like a recessive orange or something because last year he was paired with like one of the females that's just dark bands and like gray body. And the baby that I kept is sort of more pale gray base color with bands that are still dark, but they're lightening up a little bit. So it is not orange, but it is not like her either. So.
It's possible. It's hard because, like, a lot of the stuff I've seen is more polygenic,
Mhm.
but with as many potential mutations are out there, you never really know.
Mhm.
And I mean, worst case, you make orange babies that are beautiful, even if they're not genetic.
This year, the female that I have that's a little bit more orangey red. That's who he's getting paired to right now. So we'll see if those look any different if she decides.
Well, and like the orange line and the Marukis, some of the first generations weren't as vibrant, but that, second year they started really popping. And
Yeah.
a lot of the orange in the northerns was already well advanced, but I'm sure, same thing at multiple generations, you'll end up getting it.
hmm
When are you gonna try the Easterns? They got a couple more weeks.
Yeah. So I put them down like in the middle of the northern brumation. So I think at the end of January, I'm gonna bring them back up and see what's up with that because the male is proven. The female looks like a female, but I haven't even tried to pair her or anything yet. She was still growing up last season, so this is gonna be the first try.
Now, are they any colder than the northerns, or are they in the like upper 50s?
Yeah, I didn't want them to quite hit 60 because I heard a lot of people keep them a little bit colder. So like 60 is about the max that the basement is getting now.
And it does seem people are more successful that way. Some will get it at warmer temps, but it doesn't seem litter size isn't there. You're getting like two babies where maybe that, extra 5-10 degrees is better for what do you call it, like sperm generation or whatever
Yeah,
you're.
I think there's something to that, honestly. So we'll see. They're about like 55, 56, and that's kind of where I want them to be.
Well, and I know TC, that's what he did his at.
Hmm.
And
I forgot where I heard that number, but that number stuck in my brain. So.
Ryan and Ben, they might not have been breeding when you got in the blue tongues, but that's what they did. And they had like 70 some babies one year. So they were pretty successful with it. And they had a decent group, which helps.
Hmm.
Are you planning adding any other species of blue tongues, whether like genetic or more indos?
So there's a lot of Indos that I really like. If we had a brand new one, I like Tannenbars or Key Islands, but I really want more Erie and Jayas first because like there's one male this year that is carrying the team, so I definitely need more in the numbers there. But
Well,
maybe some Easterns as well. If I could figure out if what I have is really a female, then that would help moving forward to know what to shop for this year.
would you get any of the genetic ones or stick with like New South Wales like you got?
I like the ones like the New South Wales that I got with like the black and white and not too much brown and orange. I really like that look. If I can get a genetic morph, I would, but that is so tough.
And they're not the cheapest currently, but I think over time that's going to go down with, like Ron St. Pierre and Heather down in Florida.
Mhm. That one that you used in the cover photo, I saw that one at Tinley, and that was the first time I saw an Eastern morph in person, and it was so cool.
They're beautiful, and yeah, I've yet to. I got a hat, but that's not as exciting as a visual. You know.
Still, it's there.
Yeah, it's got potential to produce them in the future, so
Hmm.
that's the goal. Now, you you keep zebra and Gidgee skinks.
Hmm.
How would you compare them? Like, are they both pretty communal?
They're really similar. The zebras, well, I guess they could both be mean to each other. Like it depends on your grouping and like pairing them off correctly and how you introduce them. But I guess the biggest thing would be diet. The Gidgies are way more fruits and veggies. Like you could feed them all that, and the bugs. The zebras are more bugs. They do partake in the canned cat and dog food. I have chopped up snails for them. I've given them stuff like that, but it's always like meaty. They don't really touch any veggies or stuff like that. But they are super cute and like
Um,
really observant too. Like they'll like I was holding a crested gecko and the pair of zebra skinks that were at eye level basically ran up to come check out what was in my hands basically, and they weren't treating it like a food item. Like they weren't looking at this gecko that's way bigger than them that they were going to try to eat it or anything. They were literally just like scratching at the front glass like they were curious.
well, and those make for amazing pets for people because they want that ones, especially if they're somewhat interactive, they'll come out. How are they on handling?
They are a little fast. It's like there's a couple weird handling techniques. Like if you try to grab them, like if you're trying to move them from cage to cage and you have to grab them, they do not like that. It's like trying to grab a minnow or something. They just start like wiggling. But if you just gently scoop them up in your hands, they will sit there a lot of the time if they're used to you. Like if you don't work with them, they're gonna be a little scared regardless.
Um, do they need it as warm as the Gidgies?
I give them a basking spot that's in the 90s, so the Gidgies are a little bit warmer.
Okay.
Like the zebras, if I temperature gun it at the right time of day, like it'll be 95, 98 at peak, and the Gidgies is like 115.
Well, what's nice though, that still would fit into your room well. I'm sure they could be fine with a warmer 70s or lower 80s ambient.
Yeah, the ambient in here is usually 75 to 77 in like the spring, summer.
Are they live bears? Yeah.
Those were fresh little babies that I sat there with the camera to take a photo of. She was acting a little antsy, and the camera lens was freaking her out a little. So I had to sit there for 20 minutes for them all to come out.
I, you know, Egg layers are nice, but it is kind of nice that you don't have to incubate it in a way. You do have sometimes more things to worry about.
I am so bad at looking for eggs in like set up planted terrarium. So it's a lot of fun when you can set them up real nice and just like wait for the babies.
Do you end up missing a bit of eggs and they'll just naturally hatch, or?
So, like for example, the Eurydactylotes, the chameleon geckos from New Caledonia, I've hatched those bioactive and just waited for the babies to spontaneously appear, and that's worked out pretty good. But a lot of the other geckos, like the gargoyles and the crescent geckos, I like to be able to find their eggs pretty quick because they can eat their babies. They don't always. Like you could have a female that's nice, but it is a possibility.
I've never heard of that one. That I could see why you'd want to just be on the safe side, like especially if you see it or you see one half eaten. I'm sure that's.
And like if she lays them in like a bad spot and you don't find the eggs in time, that could be disappointing. Isopods could eat them sometimes. It's not like a guaranteed thing that could happen.
Have you had much like shells damaged over time by them, or?
It's happened once or twice, and it's basically a toss up if the female didn't have really calcified eggs, and that's why they were able to bust through the shell, or if it just happened. So,
Because yeah, I have a friend and he does a lot of bioactive, and he always worried that he might lose more eggs than it was worth, but if it
it's
barely had.
definitely not been enough to be like super annoying with it, but it is disappointing if they put all the work into making the eggs and then you just don't find it fast enough.
Would you, and I know this is going to be hard to guess, like you think you got a week window before they would get into it, or?
The one time I swear I was like hours late to the one.
Oh wow.
Because I checked her and I was like, she's gonna lay eggs. And we went out somewhere, came back like 2 or 3 hours later. She laid the eggs, but like two got busted into.
I guess at the end of the day, that's just one of those learning experience.
And that was the gastrophilus, so they lay like a cluster of like 8, 12 eggs maximum. So losing two isn't the end of the world, but it's a little bummer.
How long have you been successfully breeding those?
We got the babies, like all the adults, we raised up from little itty bitty babies, and I think we got them in 2019, and they started breeding in either 2020 or 2021. But it's been a lot of clutches. They lay a lot when they're in season. There's actually the first one I just found like 2 weeks ago.
Are they hard? Like, so would I've heard they're compared to a monitor, but in a smaller package. Would you agree?
That's probably the most accurate.
Yeah.
Like definitely, like if you want a monitor but you don't want like the humongous cage, get those. Like they're cool. They got personality. They're smart. They do that funky little display with the tongue if you startle them. Mine have never done that to me. If anyone else comes in the herp room or is working in the herp room that's not me, they will do it at them. It's pretty funny. Like they're smart enough, I think, to recognize people.
And that's kind of a good thing though, and you know, not everyone wants like a dopey crested gecko. It gives you a nice variety.
And they are fast, but I don't really like super mess around with mine. I'll tongue feed them, I'll interact with them a little bit, but I've seen people that have them like coming out on their arms, going around the room and stuff.
I would worry, as quick as they look, that
They
they
are
could
fast.
get out and be gone.
They can be fast, but they're smart enough to like know what not to do if they know that you're good and you're not gonna hurt them or anything. So like they can bolt if you startle them, but if they're used to you, they'll be good. They're not gonna like fly right off your arms or anything.
Well, that's good. You can build the trust level with them
Mhm.
then, at least.
Like it's like not a super worry. Like I could pick up some zebra skinks and not worry about them just running off into the distance. So it depends on the individuals. If you just get one and it doesn't know you yet, I wouldn't recommend trying.
Now, have you been successful with the Gidgies or the pink tongues yet?
They're on the cusp. The Gidgies will they're just big enough, they're just old enough this year that we might have babies, but it might be next year. So,
Oh,
and the pink tongues are right behind me, and I think the one is suspiciously fat, and it's one of the probable females. So I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if she's cycling, or I don't know if she's already pregnant, or if that just means she's a female, and I'm comparing her body shape with the probable male that's like way more narrow. But we have potentially two trios of the pink tongues, so it's just a waiting game on those as well. I haven't seen any suspicious behaviors, but the one female does have a couple little scuff marks on her scales, right where I would expect, like around the back and the neck.
well, and that's the hard part too with them. You middle of the night they could be going, or while you're at work. And
Mm-hmm.
um, did you try cycle them at all, like cool
Mm-hmm.
them?
They were in the room, so it dipped in like the 60s on a lot of the nights, but nothing like super super cold. So we'll see if that was enough.
Do they normally need a colder one?
I've heard that 60s might be good, but it's a lot harder to find write ups on those than it is for a lot of the other species.
One, I don't know if you know Stacy Michaels. She might be good to talk to. It
I
seems
think
like,
she's semi local as well. She's up in New York, I think.
yeah, that sounds right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And she seems to get a couple litters a year. I
Hmm.
mean, she might be able to help her. Worst case, I'm hoping to be able to get her on at some point. She works with a variety of skinks.
Yep. So fingers crossed here, but nothing for sure yet. The Gidgies as well, same boat. So two
Well,
pairs, two different. All four of the Gidgies are not related. So if they both have litters at once, that would be awesome because then I could just make more groups.
did you start them out as babies together?
It was sort of like a little juggling. Like I bought two. Well, we technically traded for two from one, and those were siblings. So I picked up two more from someone else, and then we sort of combined the babies together. And then I picked up another female, a probable female, and we swapped out one of them. So the siblings, I sold the one that was probably related to what looked like the probable male, and now he's with the other girl that I picked up from a buddy. So
And there was no fighting or anything?
it was a juggling act, but we eventually got them paired up, and I didn't wait till they were super huge adults. I kind of wanted to do it fast, but that female that I got from a friend was pretty big, so I was a little worried, but I just shoveled out the whole cage, cleaned it, bleached all the sides and all the decorations so nothing smelled like their house anymore.
Yep.
And then I just picked a day where I was totally off work, put them together, and sat there the whole time pretty much to make sure nothing weird happened. Because I heard that they can be a little bit mean.
Yeah, and like I tried, and I had issues keeping them together. And I always hear, everyone recommends starting them younger.
The one was pretty big, but the weird thing that happened is like I tried a trio at first, and they kicked out the extra female from that, so that didn't work. So they're paired.
Oh, that's either way. At least you got
Hmm. I'm
a
not
pair together.
complaining. They got more space now. That's all.
How many groups would you want to get of those?
We're gonna stick probably with the two for now. I like them a lot. I want more, but I don't have anywhere to put more Gidgy skinks because we also have the Cunninghams, which are growing up, and I have to sort those out and probably pick up some other ones from a different source because I think the three that I have are all from the same guy. And I would like to split them up so we can get some unrelated, or at least not super closely related stuff going on.
Um, how old are those? Just pretty young still.
Yeah, I would say like they were born May and July, I think. So not quite a year. We're approaching. I'd like to get them sorted out before they hit a year old. So
Well, and there's not as many people working with those either. Like I know Ron is in Florida, but you see more with the Gidgies than the Cunningham, which is
hmm
surprising.
and then there's like the two color forms. Like we have the like mostly dark color with the little white speckles, and then there's that one that's like brownish reddish with that like reticulated black pattern going on.
They're more like locales though, right? Same
Yeah.
species. Yeah.
I don't know if
Okay.
they I don't think they have like subspecies status.
I didn't think so. Like I've seen the Australian keepers just call them like the, New England form or whatever,
Hmm.
but you never know. They always change stuff on the go.
Yeah.
Now, I've always liked the Shinosaurus, and I worry on we'll go tanks with water because sometimes that could be more challenging.
Yeah.
How is the care on those? Is it pretty easy, hard?
If you've had a turtle, it is not as scary as keeping a turtle. Turtles are so messy, and that's like people's generally their only other experience with like an aquatic reptile. And the shinies are way easier. The worst thing that happens, honestly, is I have like little internal canister filters, and they get clogged really easily when they're shedding. But outside of that, it's generally good. You could just do water changes sometimes. It's a pain in the butt because they are lizards. You'll have to do it a bit. But you could get a good filter and it'll save you some time.
Now, what about the more like natural setups? Do any of those work?
Like these guys, I don't know if I'd consider it bioactive because I don't really have too much substrate. Most of their land areas are the universal rocks that I have pasted around in the background and stuff, so they can get up and they can get completely dry. That's the important part. And then there's like driftwood around. I have a little bit of like pebbles and gravel where the pothos is rooted, but I don't have like dirt because I tried it and they were just kicking it all into the water constantly.
Um, Now, are there a lot of like unrelated lines of those, or are they pretty related?
I would like to feel like there's a decent amount because they were coming in imported like perfectly allowed all throughout like the 80s and 90s, and they only put them on CITES one. I want to say maybe it was like 10 years ago at this point, but it might have been 15. It was not too long ago. I remember it happening when I was keeping in the hobby, but it's not been long enough that all the lines are intermingled.
Okay, well that's good because I mean they got beautiful red. They're amazing looking species. Have you ever? So say you wanted to vend and bring those to an expo, could you do it without water, or would you need some type of like paludarium you'd have to bring with?
I've seen like the first one I ever saw at a show. I didn't even know what it was. He had it in like a little like terrarium sort of just with a layer of water on the bottom so you could be seeing them swim around. And that was the first time I ever saw one, when we've only ever brought one to a show because they're in really high demand. I have like a huge list of folks that I would be able to message if we got another litter, which might happen. We paired them up, but I've brought that one to a show and it was just in like sphagnum moss. So as long as they're not crispy dry, they'll be fine, especially because it's only for a couple hours.
Now, is the such a high demand just because the rarity, or I know
I
there's
don't know how to pin it on one thing. They're really cool. They look awesome. They're pretty easy to feed and they're pretty easy to take care of because they don't need like the super hot basking or anything. But their gestation can be a really long time. Like it could be like 9, I think I heard 14 months for someone one time.
that is very long.
Ours was about 9, so from what I gathered, I saw them locked up one time. I don't know if they did it multiple times, but from there it would have been about 9 months.
Now, how do you get from 9 to 14 though? That's like a big range.
Because they could brumate while pregnant, and then when they wake up, they have the babies. Ours has been on a consistent schedule. If I pair them now, she will have her babies before they brumate, so in sometime in the fall. But some of them just go to bed for the year and wake up and have them.
That's weird. Like, so how cold do they like? Is it a full hibernation, a partial brumation?
Some people hard brumate them pretty cold. I don't exactly know how cold because we haven't actually done that. Like every year around October, November, they go to sleep. They dig a little tunnel in the back of their cage where I got like the pebbles set up and they stop eating and they basically go to bed till about like February they'll pop awake again, or January sometimes. The male kind of woke up earlier this year. He was traveling around his cage the other day, so we put him in with the lady.
You keep them individually then?
Most of the time, I'll have them paired up for a while. When I could like visibly see that she was pregnant the one year, she started being mean to him. I don't know if she thought it was because he was gonna try and go after her babies when she had them, but I separated them. So now in like midsummer, I'll take the male out and put him back in his own cage.
Are they aggressive breeders?
Not really. You don't have to babysit them as much as with the skinks. Like when we introduce them for the first time, we'll watch them for a little bit. There'll be some head bobbing, but you should know right away if it's going to be bad. That's been my experience. I don't really hear anybody else talk about like the pairing stage too much, but that's how it's been here. And they'll bob at each other a little bit. There'll be a little bit of chasing, never any like serious biting or anything like that.
That's nice in a way, you
And
know. You know,
then they live perfectly together for several months until that one time she got pregnant and chased him off.
now how's individually? Do you do like 40 breeder tank size, or do you give them bigger than that?
There's it's kind of hard to find. There's a Tetra tank that's kind of similar to a 40. They also make it in 75 and 20 gallons, which is really nice for like little babies and other cool lizards. But the water section on that Tetra tank is a little bit taller than a lot of the Exoterras I found. And there's a drain plug, like they have it drilled for plumbing already. So if you want to add in like a canister filter, it's pretty much set up. So, and it's got sliding glass doors, which I really like. It looks crisp. It's like Tetra made some really cool.
Is it Tetrafauna? Is that the
It's
form?
I don't think it's that one. It's like I've seen vendors around here carrying them. And I always forget what the name is till we have to pick another one up.
I got time to think. I saw them, 4 or 5 years ago or whatever it was, and just thought they were, beautiful looking. And
And
what?
they're easy. Like they eat roaches, superworms. I give them like thawed out shrimp. They'll eat little pieces of fish and smelt, and a lot of earthworms. That's a thing, but it's not their whole entire diet. But they do really love them, and it is what they eat in the wild a lot. So I always make sure there's a couple in the fridge for them. But they don't have to eat those solely, and they also the rapashi flavor for like bearded dragons. I always get the name mixed up. The grub one, the grub pie,
Yep.
not the one that's for feeder bugs. The one that has the beardy on it. That one they've also had as well.
Do you get your night crawlers from the bait store, or do you
Pretty
breed
much.
them? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard mixed opinions on those. I've heard people doing them fine for years, and then people worrying because they're not designed for animals that they're going to be unhealthy. But
I
more than like,
know there's like sometimes they'll put like dyes on them, or if you get the red wigglers, they instead of the night crawlers, the red wigglers can do a defense mechanism where they spew like this smelly yellow liquid, and sometimes the skinks, like I've used them for the Muller skinks, and they don't eat them when they're the red wigglers.
and I think the dye ones are more. Yeah, that's probably not the best,
But as
but
long as you just get like we just get the ones labeled Canadian crawlers, and they've always been good.
well, I've got them for the blue tongues before that, and I made sure that the bait shop was not garbage, I guess be the best way to put it. You know, they weren't sitting there forever and nasty, but
Yep. But honestly, PetSmart carries the exact same brand one, so no matter what, they're coming from wherever they get those from.
well, and that's probably what it is. You know, one guy's breeding it for everyone, or a couple
Mm-hmm.
people are, and you know, it's all coming from the same dirt, just one box goes to one place.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a question from Bucket List Reptiles. How do you like working with Pictus geckos?
They're really cool. Like I kind of wanted them for several years, and I think we got the first pair in like 2020 or 2021, and we got a lot really quickly. I have 18 females, I think, for this coming season, and we started with two and various other ones that we've picked up from different bloodlines, different genetics. Those are the morphs. So those are amels, and the little guys that are like more brownish are the hets. So they're carrying it. That's from that whole group.
How many different genes are in Pictus geckos? Because there's like striped and patterned ones too, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if we know for sure. There's a couple like genetic morphs, like the ones we have here. There's the amels. I have some anery. There's one black-eyed translucent that randomly popped up from a pairing, so that was fun. I think xanthic baby randomly popped up from another pairing. So we'll see where that goes. He's really small right now, but he's a little more yellow tinted as opposed to those orange ones. And there's two genes floating around that people call xanthic, and there's the amels. The amels are a little more orange. And then I guess you could consider like the striped variant maybe a morph. There's the banded ones, but honestly, I really like the stripes a lot. We pretty much only have stripes here, so everything in the entire colony is either a stripe or a bold stripe at the bare minimum.
So what's the difference between the stripe and the bold stripe? Is it just thicker?
I think I posted a picture of a really nice bold pretty recently, and it's just like the black outlining. The stripe is really, really crisp. It's a little bit wider than the normal stripes. I don't know if I have any plain old little stripes posted anywhere really, because we started with our first female was a really nice bold, so she just carried that on, and a lot of the offspring took after her.
I think I found the one you're talking about. Let's see. That one?
Yep, that's a nice bold. Like in the white line going down there, it is so crisp. There's not. Sometimes you could get speckling of some of the other color. Like there'll be little black speckles in the stripe, and it won't be just like that crisp. I don't. There's not really like a formal write up on it though, so it's basically like kind of I guess up to you what you call it. But I would consider that a bold.
Have you found a way to like change the stripe color at all?
I think it might be possible because they fire up and down a little bit. They'll change color a little bit when they're more active or depending on mood, I guess. But some of them, I see them and they'll be like more tan white when they're not fired up. And then some of the ones when they fire up from that, it'll turn white. And then like that one I posted, they are always a very crisp color. So I think there might be something there. Like I haven't seen them fire up and down as much. The white is usually white. It doesn't really fade to like the tan or like gray tint that I've seen on a couple of them. So we'll see.
But probably not
Hmm.
orange unless you go like the AML route then.
Yeah, the AMLs have like it'll be a little yellow orange tinted no matter what, but we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of selective breeding to be done with those. Like you could go in any direction. There's a lot of room to do stuff because they used to be all over the place. It seems like in like 2015 or so on groups, you would see a lot of posts from breeders with a whole bunch of different stock, a whole bunch of morphs, and now it's a little bit harder to find those because a lot of those people don't have them anymore.
I'm just they got out of it maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I know
Because
one of the huge breeders basically does not have them anymore, but a lot of the stuff that we have that pops up in people's collections is because of that.
so there's just a lot of heads floating around that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Like
kind of a nice.
I never bought an anery, but they popped up here.
Well, that surprise, is always something cool. And being a smaller gecko, not everyone can keep, a 4 foot monitor where
Mhm.
that's not going to harm a kid if it bites them, or,
Yeah,
well, it might hurt the gecko more than the kid. But
I have one Pictus gecko that is mean out of all of those. Like we have the 18 females, and I think about 12 males, and one out of that whole crew is mean and tries to bite you. So I don't know what their problem is. But for the most part, they're a little bit fast when they're babies, but the adults I can handle. I could hand walk them like a leopard gecko. I have a couple that are still really fast. A lot of those are ones I didn't raise. I like to kind of mess around with them a little bit when they're hatchlings just to get them used to people. They're still fast as babies, but when they get adult size, they calm down. In my experience, so.
well, and plus someone that's getting one as a pet, they're gonna in theory, have a lot less reptiles. They'll be able to dedicate a
Mhm.
little more time. Whereas, between I'm sure breeders and babies, it can get hectic.
Yeah,
Different parts
especially
of the year.
they're really prolific. But another cool thing about them is they're kind of personable. Like I'll have the cricket cup, they'll hear me shaking it, and I turn around and they're all standing like where they could see me, just all stood up on their little legs, watching me, just waiting because they know it's cricket time.
So, would you say they're smarter than crested geckos then?
That's a tough one because I really like crested geckos, but they don't act like that when I get ready to feed them.
I because
Not
it
quite as much. There's a couple of them that know what's up, but like every single Pictus gecko is at the front and they are ready.
and it could just be they just can tell it's food time and they're
Hmm.
smart enough to you know figure that cue out.
Yep.
What about the anoles you have? Was it the smallwood eye?
Hmm.
How's those been going?
They're neat. Like we tried to breed them in 2022, and I think I had them just a little bit too cold. It was still warm, But this past season, we heated them up, and I actually wrote it on the board, so I didn't forget. It was like 100-degree basking spot for at the tippy top of the enclosure, and the bottom of the cage, depending on the time of day, like the bare minimum was 75, but usually it was in the 80s. And once we did that, because I mean it's really hot where they live in the summer, so as soon as we did that, she was laying so many eggs, and she was laying an egg every 6 days at peak. I shut the basking off in the fall just to give her a little break. She didn't look like bad or anything, but just a little break from all those eggs. I think it was a good thing to do.
Now, how they get what, like 6 inches?
They're pretty big. Like if they're not as big as the biggest nightingale I've ever seen, but if I were to put one on my arm, they're like the whole length. So I would say I've never measured them, but definitely over a foot.
Well, and see, the reason why I asked, that's some smaller geckos being in a wheelchair, especially jumpy ones, don't make the most sense because, well, if they jump and get away, they're gone. But, something like that, being it gets bigger, I'm guessing they can tame down with some work too, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Like if you have to grab them, they do not like that. But they're easy to coax around the enclosure. They can bite. They do have pretty hefty teeth, and they can climb your walls. So that's another thing to consider.
So maybe they might not be the best then.
They're easy to like coax around though. They're not like I've kept like Phelsuma and day geckos and stuff, and they would be pretty apt to run straight out of the enclosure. The anoles, they will just be on their branch, they'll be on the back wall of the enclosure. They're not really apt to be running around because they know that they're used to me not going in there and pestering them really. So they'll just be sitting around when I change the food out or like the worm cup and giving them a miss. They're not runners.
Now, are you doing mainly insects and some crested gecko diet then?
Yeah, so when they were growing up, it was a lot of crickets, but once they hit breeding size, really the only thing the female wanted to eat was hornworms and rapashi, and that's been, from what I've heard, a lot of people go that route.
Do you know why they prefer that, or
I
just
think it's just maybe it's a seasonal diet thing in the wild. I've also given them like raspberries and like squished blueberries, or they eat mango as well. Any fruit that has like a nice color, I think, entices them as a treat. But the most popular things definitely like I use the Pangea with insects, the Rapashi, like the standard flavor for crested geckos, and also the hornworms. In like peak breeding season, I think it helps her keep the weight on real good.
well, and if they're you got an egg every week, that
Yeah.
definitely has to use up a lot of reserves.
Like I've had geckos that lay a lot of eggs. Like Pictus geckos are extremely prolific, and you gotta make sure that you're feeding them good and like they're all calcium dusted and stuff like that. But the anoles, they were not very stressful. Like she never really looked at any point that like she was bad or there's no like hips poking out. She kept the weight really good.
Have now a lot of those prepared diets have a lot of vitamins already in it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to do a bit of extra supplementing during breeding season?
I would put dust on the hornworms and sometimes the fruit, but not really like overdoing it. The Pictus geckos, by comparison, I always keep a little bowl of calcium in their habitats. All the females get that, and since I've done that, I haven't had an issue with any of those. But the anoles never got that.
Without the calcium, was it just a lot thinner eggshells, or were they like females crashing?
You could like they would look bad sometimes after they would lay eggs, or it would be really hard to keep the weight on them, or the eggs would be a little soft. They're a hard shelled gecko eggs, so they gotta like really make that really calcified. And since I added the bowl of calcium, they could just free feed, lick up whatever they want. I have had zero issues.
Oh, and some like that sounds like a simple, easy fix to make your
Hmm.
life easy.
Yeah, it's not hard. Just get the big zoom out of calcium and scoop it out as we switch the bowl out if it gets dirty. Like if you hit it with the mister too many times, it'll get just gross. So you got to switch it out every once in a while. But a lot of the times they will use it all up pretty fast. So I'll just put like a little scoop in there and check it every time I go around to feed crickets.
Do you hand mist, or do you guys got misters set up for the geckos?
I do hand spraying. I would like a misting system, but a lot of this stuff is like all over the place. So I've got some tropical stuff here, some over there, some over there. So it would need like three separate systems. Maybe when we move, could put it all on the same wall because a lot of those mist kings can run like a ton more than they actually say they can on the box.
Yeah, and that sounds like a big project when you already got everything set up trying to move it.
And I don't really mind the hand misting, so it's not super high on the priority list.
The Now your crested geckos, those don't dry out too bad.
Mm-mm. So I have a lot of them in like the big totes. So if you know your situation and you could put your ventilation holes exactly how you need them, like someone that lives in the desert probably needs less than here, but our humidity is pretty like high ambient. Like I haven't had any issues no matter what season it is really.
Even the winter, because you're in the Northeast, right?
Yeah. And like I use mulch on the bottom of their cages, and with the misting, I'll do it like 2 or 3 times a week, and that will keep it good. The crested geckos do need an actual like dry out period. People will have way more issues if they keep them soggy than if they keep them a little bit drier. And just as long as you got a water bowl, it's good.
Um, so you do morning geckos too, right?
Hmm. We have a big group of the yellow bellies and a couple Hawaiians that are just now gonna reach breeding size probably by early summer.
So this question might being so some snake species start off better on smaller geckos. Have you ever thought about doing that with morning geckos?
It is not. I know a lot of people do that. It's not a bad thing. We've started stubborn feeders with like little tiny mornings before. It's not something I do very often. And a lot of times, if you just save the sheds from a lot of the geckos, if you make like the worst little burrito out of a pinky and a piece of gecko shed, that will get the tricky snake eating just fine.
That's probably a lot better to do than you don't have to sacrifice your
Hmm.
geckos. I'm sure between everything you could find shed easy enough.
Yeah, I have a little Ziploc baggie actually. All the
And
little
that's
head pieces.
um so one final question to help out some newer breeders. What's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Oof. One piece.
Or two if you got two good tips or
Oh my god. I would just like read everything you can about just pick a single species to start and why it interests you, and make sure just read everything and how it could fit into your home and your environment. And if you're willing to like actually put in the effort for a nice little breeding project, like I have all the crested geckos because I like how many colors they come in, and I have the pictus geckos and the skinks for the same reason. I really like variable stuff. So whatever's important to someone in particular, like if they want something really interactive, like a lot of the monitors would be good for that. There's not as many color variations in like Aki monitors compared to a lot of the geckos, but the personality is totally different. So just read everything, and not just on Facebook groups, like books as well. And I get a lot of stuff from podcasts because having other people on that keep similar stuff is also a really good resource because a lot of the topics that come up you don't really see posts on too much.
no, and even then some topics they'll briefly touch on, and you get 5% of what you need to do, and you miss the
Hmm.
rest.
Yep. And I know, like, I do most of the lizards here, and Dan does most of the snakes. He's been on a podcast before, but like we each have our likes for what we've gotten. His schedule's a little more busy than mine, so he has a lot of the snakes, and they work out for that. So that's another just thoughts to consider.
Well, it sounds like you guys, planned very well between how you got it set up, like each room, and then, like you just said, how much time you could dedicate to each.
Yep.
You don't want to get too overwhelmed too quick, and then
Yeah.
you start having more issues than you can deal with.
Yeah, that's like another thing. Don't get like too many breeding animals right off the bat. Like I've jumped into a lot of projects with a significant quantity, but I pondered the thought for a while and knew that I could have time for whatever happened with those. But a lot of people don't, or they just can't. So
Well, I wanted to thank you for coming on. Where can everyone find you guys?
we're on Instagram as roots underscore scoots underscore scales, and then roots scoots and scales on Facebook. I basically have them linked so the same thing posts to each of them no matter what. So you can see there. If you message, it's both me and Dan on there. If it's a lizard inquiry or a question, I'll answer it. Dan handles most of the snake stuff. That's just how it's split off. Also, we have just our personal Facebook pages as well.
Well, thank you again, and you have a great rest of your night. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
You as well. Thank you.